Thomas, and I'm working on a little bit different rocket today. This is the belly flopper from Semrock, and first of all, to my knowledge, this is my first Semrock kit, and second, this has got a really weird recovery, and as far as I can understand it, basically it shoots up like a rocket and then it comes down kind of part falling and part gliding. Now this is a very balanced critical kit, which is why they only recommend these two motors. And in the instructions, which I've already read online, it does say to only use those two or it won't function properly. So we'll go ahead and open this up. Alright, now, if you've been following along in chronological order, you know that I've been working on a lot of beginner's kits lately. This is a much bigger kit, and you'll definitely want to have some experience before trying to build this one. Okay, so here we've got our instructions, right, and the parts list here. So this is what we need to begin with. Okay, so we've got an Estes nose cone that's been modified. Basically, they took the base off of it. Okay, we've got 3 body tubes total. Okay, now this one is the forward body tube. It's slotted for smaller fins. This one is the aft body tube with larger fin slots, and I found a coupler inside of there. Let me check this one. Yep. So if you're missing a coupler or couplers, check the insides of your body tubes there. Alright, and then we've got the middle body tube. It has no slots and no coupler stuck in it. Then we've got fins here. I keep looking for 3, but it only has 2 for each one. So these are the aft main fins here, and deeply slotted. And then in a smaller package we have the centering rings, which have a vent system to them. We've got the smaller fins that go in the front, some clay, and this is for balancing the rocket. As I said, this rocket really depends on perfect balance in order to fly correctly. Usually we put weight in the nose cone, but my understanding is that we put weight in the aft end of this rocket. And then we've got an engine clip there. Alright, we've got a body tube marking guide. Alright, some water slide decals, and then this is an alignment tool that we'll need for putting the fins on properly. And then last thing in the box is the engine mount tube. So it looks like we've got everything here. So I'm going to put most of this aside and we will get started. Now before we actually get to building things, I'm running through the instructions here, which you should always do. And they have these in pretty good chronological order, but if you've noticed in a lot of my other videos, I often have things going ahead of time while something is drying, or glue is drying, or paint is drying, or whatever it happens to be. But just a few things to consider here. The way they show this is as kind of a gray rocket, which is going to be really easy to lose in the sky, not to mention just kind of looking blah. And so, for example, maybe you want to, instead of painting this all one color, you could paint each section a different color. And if that's the case, there are a few things you might want to do there. For one, you might want to, before you add any fins or anything, paint the tubes. Now that does mean you're going to have to scratch the paint a little bit around the fin slots so that the glue can bind appropriately. You also might want to consider painting the fins first before you mount them. And that you can do by masking off the fin tabs and then painting the fins. Okay, so just some things to think about. Most likely I'm just going to paint mine all one color, but it's not going to be gray. I might paint the fins something else, but we'll see as we go along. Okay, but I just wanted you to consider those things before we start putting everything together. Our first task, and probably the most onerous one here, is sanding the fins. Now, according to the instructions, they want us to round all of the edges of the fins except for the root edge and the fin tab itself. Okay, now you don't necessarily have to sand all of them, and this is always a trade-off between strength and aerodynamics. So if we just do the forward edge here and sand that rounded, that increases the aerodynamics a whole lot just by itself. Now if you want to sand an airfoil around the back edge here, the trailing edge, you can do that. Same thing with the tip edge. The more you have edges tapered or rounded, though, the more likely they are to crack if they hit something. So that's always a bit of a trade-off. I'm just going to round the leading edge here, starting with some 150 grit sandpaper. Now you could also use a rotary tool like a Dremel, but if you don't have a lot of practice using it, practice on some scrap wood first, because it's easy to get going too far and you end up with divots in the edge. What I'm doing here is first just flattening the edge here so that we don't have a sharp angle, but we start to get a curvature here. And so that's what, be sure to check the cross section here frequently, because what tends to happen is the middle sands more quickly than the edges, and that's just due to the difference in pressure as you're holding it. So you also want to kind of make sure of your hand position and try to eliminate biases that are just from the way you hold it. Alright, so as we knock down these edges here, then we can start rolling the wrist and rounding these over. And again, come back and check in cross section. So on mine, I've got more sanded on this side than the other. So I need to spend a little more time here. Now my fin has got a little bit of a bend to it. I think that will sort itself out. If you're really concerned about it, you can press it down under a few heavy books for a night, and that'll usually bring it around as well. Alright, as I said, for my aesthetics, I'm good with just sanding the edges, just enough to get most of that soot off of there. Again, you can round or taper these as you like. Okay, and then we need to do the faces, and this is just going to create a lot of dust, so if you're sensitive to it, wear a dust mask. Now I'm going to trade my 150 grit for some 220. How much sanding you do is a bit up to personal preference. This is plywood, so it doesn't need quite as fine of sanding as balsa does. So let's give it a shot with the 220 here. go ahead and hit my edges just lightly with the 220 as well. Alright, so that's one fin sanded. At this point, if you want, you could use a sanding sealer if you so desire to smooth this out even more. I am going to use a filling sandable primer once I get the fins attached as part of my priming process, and that also helps fill in the grain. Okay, so I'm going to do basically the same thing with the other 3 fins here. 2 of them will be much quicker since they're smaller, but I'm going to do all this off camera and then come back. I've finished sanding the fins, and these have been sanded with sandpaper starting with 100 going to 150 grit and then to 220 grit, and they look very nice. We'll set those aside for the moment. For the next step, we're going to need the tube marking guide here, and there's a copy of this in the instructions, but they also sent a little cardboard copy of it with the parts, so you don't have to cut up your instructions if you don't want to. So I'm just going to cut this out. Alright, now we're going to first of all need the middle tube. Alright, so this is the tube that doesn't have any slots in it. We'll set that aside for just a moment. And here we need to draw a straight line down the entire length. Okay, now you can use a door frame for this, or if you have the Estes tube marking guide, you can use that as well. Okay, so here I'm just going to run a line down the length. Alright, that looks good, and that's all you need for that. Set that aside for just a moment. Now we need the aft body tube, first of all. Okay, aft body tube, this is the one with the 2 longer fin slots. Okay, so we're going to take our tube marking guide here, and we're aligning the dark stripes on the marking guide with the tube slots there. All right, and then we're going to make a little mark right here and here. Okay, we'll set that aside for just a moment. We're going to do the same thing for the upper body tube. Okay, so this has the smaller slots in it that are further up the tube. We're going to do this in the same way. So we're going to align the slots and the big bold marks there. And if they don't align perfectly, try and get it balanced between the two. Okay, so now we mark here and here. And then we're going to put both the upper and lower body tubes on the tube marking guide again, or in your door frame. Alright, so we're going to take those 2 marks that we made and use those to make a line all the way down the tube. Okay, so there's the aft, and we need the forward tube. Alright, when we get this all done, these lines are going to be used to orient all the tubes relative to each other. Okay, so for now we can go ahead and set aside the tubes once more. Next we're going to need the motor mount. Okay, so there's the motor mount tube. Alright. Motor mount hook and the centering rings. We do not need the clay yet. So put that back away. Alright, so this is pre-slotted for the engine clip. And then what we need to do here is make a mark at 1/8 of an inch, or about 3 millimeters from the forward end, which will be this end, and another mark at 1/4 inch, or about 6 millimeters from the aft end. Alright, make sure I got my ends going right. Okay, so forward end here. Don't make your marks directly in line with where the clip is going to go. Okay, so 1/8 of an inch, or about 3 millimeters there. Okay, and then about 6 millimeters, or 1/4 inch right there. Alright, so here we've got our engine hook. One end of that is going to poke in through that slot. Well, looks like, oh, wrong end. Slot. I was trying to poke through a mark. That wasn't going to happen. Come on. There we go. Okay, now first I'm going to dry fit all of this. So, alright, the ring with the little slot in the tab there, that's going to go on the aft end. And then the ring without the slot in it goes on the forward end. And that's going to go basically right here. Alright, and this one is going to go at that 6 millimeter or 1/4 inch mark. Okay, now if you're having trouble getting on there, first you can just take a thumbnail here and kind of chamfer the edge inward. There we go. Okay, and that's going to go right there at that 1/4 inch mark. Okay, and then this will be able to flex. Okay, now to keep our engine hook in place, we're going to wrap some tape around the middle of it here. You can use just about any tape for this. Alright, and they recommend 2 to 3 circumferences of tape, and that's going to be way off there. End up spiraling it. Alright, so make sure that clip is in line with the tube. There we go. Okay. So now we're going to take some wood glue. So first we're going to put it around the aft edge. Okay, don't glue the engine hook. Sometimes these fancy glue bottles are more pain than they're worth. Okay. Alright, so we'll put our aft ring on, pushing it through the glue until we reach that 1/4 inch mark there. Alright, make sure everything is where it should be. Okay, now we're going to have to align the holes on these. I'm trying to just make sure that we're doing this, okay, that we've got enough clearance. All right, that's good. All right, now we're going to put glue up here on the forward end. Okay, so that'll go on to our little mark there. Okay, and now we need to line up the holes. And they recommend using a pencil or something similar. Stick it through a hole to make sure things are aligned. That one's too big. Try this one. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And now we're going to let this whole assembly dry. The glue on my motor mount is dry, and now I'm going to add some fillets to it. But the instructions also caution us against excessive weight, so my fillets are going to be as minimal as I can make them. Okay, now since we pressed the rings in from the outside, they've already got a good fillet in there for the most part. I'm going to strengthen the outer part here, and again with just, that's actually too much there, just a little bit of glue. Alright, and go ahead and smooth that around. It's like a whole bunch of little things add up here, so we'll try and keep it light. Alright, I'm going to do the same thing to the forward ring here. Alright, now you may be thinking about why was it that we had to align all the holes on this? And it turns out they act as the launch lugs. So when we get ready to launch this, the launch rod goes up inside the rocket. Alright, we're going to let that dry for a while and then come back. Now we're ready to insert the motor mount into the body tube. And according to the instructions, we need to line up the engine hook with the alignment line on our body tube. I'm going to dry fit this first. And then the body tube and the engine hook should be flush with each other. So I'm just going to stand this on its end and push. Okay, and so that's flush. And the other important thing to look for is make sure that the centering rings are not visible in here. So if you've got a centering ring here or a centering ring here, you may need to adjust it a little bit. All right, but if we've got all our measurements right the first time, then that should be clear there. Now what they ask us to do is apply a heavy bead of glue and just shove the whole thing through it. I'm going to be a little bit more precise than that. Okay, so what I'm going to do instead is use an applicator to put a ring of glue relatively forward, and then when we first insert this, then we'll put another ring of glue back in here. And that way each ring gets its own glue without forcing a huge amount of glue forward and then have relatively nothing left behind there. Alright, so I'm going to apply this about 2/3 of the way up the slots there. And I don't want to get it in the slots. You can also do this from the aft end. Just look down at, you'll be able to see the glue really easily. Okay, so now I'm going to put in about halfway there. And now I'll put another ring of glue just inside the aft end of the body tube. Alright. We don't want that to fall completely out. Okay, now recalling that we need to align here. You do want to do this quickly once it hits that glue, and just go ahead and force it in like that. Okay, so here, may need to move it just a little. It's not a big deal if you're not perfectly in line. Alright, but we do need that flush down here, and again, nothing. Actually, I see just a little bit of centering ring. Alright, and that should be good. And so once again, I'm going to allow this to dry. And in fact, we've got some excess glue here. I am going to take a tissue and just wipe that up. Again, we're trying to control for weight as much as we can here. You can also kind of form that into its own fillet there if you like. But once again, we're going to sit and wait for glue to dry. Next, I'm going to prepare the couplers before we put the tubes together. We need to make a halfway mark on each one of them. So I'm guessing these are probably in inches. They are. Okay, so those are 4 inches long. We'll make a 2-inch mark there. And one here. We're going to start with the aft tube here. I'm just going to dry fit this to make sure we don't have any problems. That's really tight. Alright, so if that's the case, you can use your thumb to kind of chamfer out and widen the body tube entrance there. Okay, so that goes in like that. Alright, now we're going to apply a bead of glue inside there. Alright, and insert one of the couplers. Give it kind of a twist as you go in. Whoop, too far. Alright, and put it right to that mark. We're going to do the same thing with the middle tube here. So once again, make sure it fits. Alright, apply a bead of glue. And slide it into the halfway mark. Give the glue about 10 minutes to set before going on to attach the tubes together. Otherwise, you may end up with a case where the joiner here, the coupler, slides down further into the tube where we don't want it. While we're waiting for glue to dry, I'm going to turn my attention to the nose cone here. This was molded in 2 sections, so we've got a really obvious seam here. And the easiest way to take care of that is by sanding this. Now I prefer to wet sand it because it gives a finer finish and a little bit more control. You can dry sand it as well. What I recommend is first sanding with 220 grit sandpaper to knock down this seam. And then once you got that down, move on to either 320 or 400 grit sandpaper and use that all the way around, not only on the seams, and that will give a nice even tooth to which the paint can adhere better. You probably also will want to at least just go over this with a little bit of sandpaper of whatever you've got laying around here. I've got a little bit of 150 here, and just take off the burrs so they don't interfere when we get to the gluing on part. Okay. Now, depending on how you want your rocket to come out, if you want to paint the nose cone a different color, I would do that now. And then once you've got it all done, attach it to the rest of the rocket. So I'm going to take this off camera and give it some wet sanding and then come back. I've sanded the nose cone starting with 220 grit, moving to 320 and then 400 grit, and it's resulted in a nice smooth finish. You can just barely see the seam there. Okay, and then you can keep going if you want to. You can also just ignore it and fly it without the sanding. That's completely up to you. It's probably not going to affect performance a whole lot. So this is going to go over to the fume hood where I'm going to prime and paint it. The tube couplers have glue that is set, and so now we're going to put these all together. Now make sure that you start with the aft one here with the long fin slots. Alright, and it's got a coupler. And then our mid tube here also has a coupler. Alright, and it's a good idea to dry fit these. I'm going to stretch this one out a bit so it's not wanting to go in easily. Okay, so we try that again. And all of our lines that we drew on these have to align here. Okay, so that's going to be like that. And then, now this one, I think the forward tube can go in either direction. That looks like it's right at midway there. So that's, an edge is about 17 that way. Not quite. Alright, we better check the instructions here. Okay, I am not seeing anything that tells me one way or another. So I'm going to assume that it's pretty close to being centered and it doesn't matter which way to go. Okay, so I'm going to put mine on this way. Okay, so everything aligns there. The two slots here should also be facing in the same direction as the two slots here, which it is. Okay, so now this is going to be much like we did with the couplers. Is we're going to head and add another bead of glue inside of here and then put the couplers into place. Okay, so this is my middle tube. And I'm going to couple this onto the aft tube, which has its coupler already. Alright, and you want to get this close just in case the glue grabs. So I'm going to find my line here. Okay, give it a little twist as we go on. Yeah, that glue is wanting to grab. Okay, and then just align those. Alright, and put a little pressure on it just for a few seconds there. Make sure it doesn't try and separate. Okay, and this is going to become quickly awkward. Well, I cannot make my words go together today. This is going to quickly become very awkward under the camera, so I'll do my best here. Okay, so now we got the forward tube. And we're going to couple it to the middle tube. And again, getting our alignments correct. Okay. And now we're going to let all of that dry. My body tube couplings are dry, and so now we're ready to put on the fins. We're going to start with the aft fins and then do the forward fins. First I'm just going to dry fit these. Okay, and that should go all the way in. You shouldn't have a big gap or anything in here. If you have a gap like this, try sanding the fin tab just a little bit at a time until it goes in there. Okay, we'll also be using this fin alignment tool. And it's going to be easiest to get this on before we put the fins on it. Okay, and so here we're simply going to take some wood glue. And we're going to put a bead of glue all along here. So get the root edges, the tab edge, like that. Okay, make sure you get this oriented in the correct position. And we're just going to slide that back in there. And then this alignment guide here will go over like that. Okay, and it's supposed to make sure that we keep this in the correct alignment. Alright, so it's supposed to kind of sit like that. Go ahead and keep a little bit of pressure on the fins until the glue holds there. Let that fully dry and then go on to the next fin. And we're going to repeat that for the other aft fin and for the two forward fins. But I'll do that off camera. The glue on my fins is dry, and so now we're ready to apply fillets. And this will be just like you do with any other model rocket. So we're just going to run a bead of glue here. And you can do all of the fins at once as long as you keep the rocket horizontal here. And it's a good idea to have some wipes handy. And I'm going to come back the opposite direction and kind of clean up some of that. Now if you want really built up fillets, actually would not recommend it because again the weight is critical to this, and if you got really thick fillets it's probably going to throw off the center of gravity, possibly enough to make it so it does not fly or recover right. And really the whole purpose of this rocket is its unusual recovery system. You're not going to be making any altitude records with it. Sorry, bumping into my camera bracket there. And again. This rocket is really kind of awkward here. It's just so big. Okay, we'll do the same thing to the front fins, but I'll do that part off camera. The fillets are dry on the main part of the rocket. I'm coming back to the nose cone here. I've decided that I'm going to go ahead and glue it on before I paint the rocket. And the instructions say to put in a thin layer of wood glue inside the tube and then epoxy it on. I have no idea why. I've always epoxied nose cones to, basically plastic to cardboard without any problems. I am going to take an emery file here and just roughen up the shoulder a little bit to give more surface area for the epoxy to grip onto. If you don't have an emery board, you use sandpaper, even a file for that matter. Okay, we just want to roughen it up a little bit there. Here I'm going to use a 5-minute epoxy, and it doesn't take much. I'm going to make about 2 grams worth here. And most of these epoxies, at least for small volumes, you can use either weight or volume for proportions here. So I'm going to get about a gram here. That's going to be pretty close. Okay, and as long as you're within 10%, you're fine. Alright, so now we'll put another gram in here, and that'll bring us to 2. And if you happen to overshoot, just put a little bit more of the opposite material in. There we go. Now note I'm wearing gloves, and the reason for that is repeated exposure to epoxy can cause allergic reactions in your skin. It's best not to have that. Okay, so we'll move that out of the way. We just need to stir this up for about a minute, and then I will come back when we're ready to apply it. Okay, my epoxy's ready to go. I'm going to do one last quick check here, make sure it fits. That's fine. So now we're going to just put in some epoxy right inside the forward end of the tube here. And you don't need big globs of it, just a nice even amount all the way around. Because again, if you get a huge amount of epoxy in here, that's going to substantially change the mass distribution of the rocket. And this could change its balance. Just a little more there. Okay, and then we'll just put this on, just kind of move it back and forth to seat it. Alright, and then we'll just set this aside to cure, and once all of the glue and epoxy and everything has fully cured, then we'll go to priming and painting. Now here again, it's going to be difficult to show the entire rocket here just because of its size. This has had 2 coats of a sandable filling primer on it, and we can still see definite seams here. Now we can fill those in either with a whole lot more of the primer, or we can use a wood filler, or in this case, this is plastic model contour putty. It works pretty much like wood filler does. Okay, and we can put this into the seams. If you don't like spirals, they're not as easy to see, but you can use these to fill spirals as well. And the idea here is we just mold this in with our hand. Just use a finger here. And then you let that dry and you sand it. Okay, so I'm going to do the nose cone here. The same thing that we would do with the other seams, although I'm not going to show all of those. It's going to rank up there with watching golf. Now this does start to dry almost instantly, so you want to be pretty quick about it here. This is non-toxic once it's dry. If you need to, for some reason, resuspend it, you can do that with alcohol. Looks like I dropped it there. That bumped into something. Okay. This needs to dry for about an hour, and then it can be sanded. Off camera, I'll go ahead and sand that, and then also wet sand the entire rocket. My belly flopper has had 2 coats of white primer on here, and now I'm starting to add the color coats. So if everything goes as planned, this is going to transition from this dark navy blue up to a medium blue, and then a very light blue at the nose cone, kind of simulating a water type of motif here. That's assuming everything goes right. So this is the first coat of the dark blue. We'll give this at least one more coat and then transition up to the other colors. I've finished painting, and I can't get the whole rocket under here at once, but I am going with kind of a beach theme here. So we go from a light blue down to a medium blue and then to a dark blue here. And now we're ready to put on the decals. So the decals that come with the kit are water slide, and the main one is this big belly flopper, and it's intended to go on the underside of the rocket here. And so what we'll do is just cut this out as close as we can. Now these other guys here are for center of pressure and center of gravity locations, and we will want those because this model very much depends on having those locations be very precisely known, and will rebalance the rocket if they are out of whack. So go ahead and just cut this as close as you can. I wouldn't try and do each individual angle there of the edge hexagons. Oop. Cut through the corner there, that's all right. Okay, I am going to cut off those sharp corners. Okay, so this is almost too big for my basin here. But this is just some room temperature water, and we'll let that set there for probably about 20 seconds here. Alright, and again, I'm going to put mine right about here, so traversing the part of the body tube with the forward fins. Okay, so that's starting to come off here. So we'll just slide these a little bit, just until I have a little bit coming off there. I'm going to go ahead and try and get this where I want before I even move anything. And then just slide the paper out from underneath it. Okay, and I'm going to take a tissue here, just a little bit of water on it, and use that to spread things out and get the wrinkles out. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm not going to try and reposition that. I am going to now just work from the middle toward the outside to get any air or water out from beneath it. Okay. Now, in our instructions, okay, the center of pressure is 28 centimeters from the bottom. The center of gravity is 52.1 centimeters from the bottom. Okay, and so we're going to take two of these here. So I'm not sure what the trefoil is other than radioactive. I don't know if they just had a general set they put on here. Alright, but the off and on here, the black and white, that is for center of gravity, and then the white with the circle with the dot in it there, that is our center of pressure. Now the bottom of my rocket here is fairly dark, so these may not show up very well, but as long as we know that they're there and that we can find them, we'll be okay. So let me turn this around. Alright, so first of all, the center of pressure. So we're going to measure from the aft end here up to 28 centimeters. It's going to be right here. And then for the other one, we're going to need an actual measuring tape. So our center of gravity is 52.1. And this is going to take us out of the camera range here. Let's see if I move this up. All right, so 52.1 is right here. Now that's empty center of gravity. The only recommended engines for this are a D12.3 or a D12.5 black powder motor. And so the center of gravity with the motors in is also going to be fairly consistent. Okay, so I'm going to first of all get, let's see, I want to use the bigger ones here. So I'll do the center of gravity first. Alright, and that where we made the mark, that's where the middle of the decal will go. Okay, we'll just float that in the water for just a moment. Put this on a stand. I don't like putting the pressure on the fins. And hopefully this will stay in focus. Right now I've lost my mark. I'll go ahead and remeasure here so I can find it. Alright, so, oh, there it is, 52.1. Alright, this should be about ready. Yep. Should be right there. And as I said, it's going to be kind of hard to see, but we'll know that it's there. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing here with the center of pressure. Okay, we'll let that one soak in the water for a moment. And let's see if I move this so we can just see it here. Okay, then we'll bring this one up. Alright, I just had the mark. There it is. This one's going to be even harder to see. That will manage. And then the last water slide decal we have is the Semrock logo. And I'm just going to put this right below the belly flopper decal. Okay, so that's all of the water slide decals. If you want to put a clear coat over these, I would wait at least 48 hours. Some people actually suggest waiting a week, and then very carefully test a small amount of your clear coat on an edge here before going on to do the same. to do the whole thing. I've had a lot of problems in the past with clear coat lifting or crinkling the decals, and I've got really wary of it. I am going to add some other decals here that keep in touch with the kind of beach party theme that I'm going for. And so I'll do those off camera, and then when we come back, we'll see the whole completed rocket. One final thing before we finish this up. This is the clay that comes with the kit, and you'll need this to balance the rocket. So before every launch, you're going to want to take some string or twine or a little bit of line, whatever, just something you can hang this by at the center of gravity here. And then if it's too nose heavy, you'll simply take some of this clay and apply it around the inside here of the aft end of the rocket. Alright, also, you may have noticed there's no launch lug. I think I mentioned this before, but to launch this, you simply run a 3/16 inch launch rod up one of these sets of holes here and up the inside of the rocket. Okay, now, give you an idea of what I've done to this. Again, staying with kind of a beach theme. Alright, I've added some additional decals here. Alright, and with that, that is my belly flopper. So, I hope you had fun building this with me. Have a great flight and a safe recovery. And please stay tuned for more of my videos.